Let me just see if I can get. All right, so I've lost my chat window, Carol. So if somebody would like to just keep an eye on that, if there are questions that come up, I'll be happy to answer them as we go through.
I'll keep.
Um, okay, great. So like Carol said, my name is Liza. This is actually my third year doing a webinar with the Bethlehem Co-op Market and the library. So the first year I did your plant-powered plate, and then last year I did one on shopping locally. And this year we're going to chat about your low waste kitchen. So I have been a member owner for probably at least 3 years, maybe four. That are both in Upper Bucks County and in the Lehigh Valley. Um, I am vegan, so I do eat obviously a lot of plants is my go-to. So I have some local businesses that I really are my regular places. And I'll try and touch on a couple of them because they really fit into this low waste kitchen topic as we're going through. So really what we're just going to talk about is some tips and tricks for reducing waste in your kitchen, but also ways that you can just help the overall food insecurity issues that we have. So I'm going to start by just throwing out some facts at you. So first of all, 2.5 billion, that's with a B, tons of food waste per year throughout the world. And who is the biggest contributor? Unfortunately, it's us. And we've got an estimated 1.2 billion. When I was researching numbers for this particular bit, I did see estimates as high as 160 billion. But here's how that really breaks down. So you're looking at 30 to 40% of our food supply is being wasted. That equates to 218, again, billion dollars, or 130 billion meals. And so what I'm going to do at that with that statistic is just jump down to 13.5% of our households have some food insecurity during 2023. And I can't say that I'd be, I wouldn't expect the statistics to get any better between 2024 and 2025. So that's a lot of meals that are being wasted. And what that equates to for you and I is about 325 pounds per person, or 900. This is the one that really got me. 975 average size apples. So that's as if you were just tossing them in the trash. And that's more than an apple a day. Um, so one of the contributors, 80%, is because we don't necessarily understand our expiration labels. So that is the first thing that I'm going to touch on when it comes to how to reduce waste, is trying to give it a better understanding of our food expiration labels. So depending on where you live or the brands that you shop, you're probably going to see different quote unquote expiration dates. Um, the one thing I will say is use common sense. If it smells off, if it tastes off, if it looks off, just play it safe. Send it to the compost bin. But what we really have are, variations on a theme of sell by, expires on. Really, the only one that is a hard and fast, I'll call it a hard and fast expiration date, is the expires on. So that is the last day the product is considered safe. But honestly, if you've kept something um, well stored, so if it's a refrigerated item, keeping things in the back of your fridge where it's the coldest, um, you can actually get extra days on of it. If you haven't opened it, you're probably going to go past that expiration date safely. But again, you've got to use your common sense. So the first one, sell by, that's not a safety date. That's really a date used by the retailers to determine how long they should keep something on the shelf. And with that sell by date, there's really about a third of the time that the manufacturer is also expecting it to sit on your shelf. So think in terms of a can of beans that has a sell by date on it. It's going to sit on the retailer's shelf, then it's going to sit on your shelf. And that's all worked into that sell by date. Best if used by or before, and the use by date. Those are two dates that are a suggestion and they're not a mark of safety. But it's really when the taste and quality are at their peak. And that kind of feeds into the last one, which is the freeze by date. So if you pick up something at the market and it has a freeze by date on it, what they're telling you is you can keep it in your refrigerator up until that date, but really you want to get it into the freezer if you want to keep it at its peak beyond that. And the rule of thumb is usually fresh products, it's under a week that you can keep them opened in the fridge. And then a month in a freezer safe container is usually ideal. Now, I can tell you I freeze things all summer long so that I can have them in the winter. And I do use reusable bags or even silicone bags that will keep things longer. And I'm usually keeping things in my freezer for 6+ months. So again, that goes back to the first comment that I made is using your common sense. If it smells, if it tastes, if it looks off, just play it safe and send it to the compost bin. All right, so let's take a quick look around our kitchen. And this is really where, we're going to spend most of our time tonight. So paper products. I know you probably thought I was going to be talking mostly about food scraps, but paper products are a huge consumable item. And just by, I know there are some folks that love their paper plates because it's convenient. You don't have to wash a dish, but the manufacturing of those paper plates, sending them off to the landfill, all of that contribute to waste. And so by just reducing your overall paper use, you're actually reducing your cost in your own kitchen and helping the environment. A couple of my favorite products in my swapping paper for reusable are a lot of unpaper products. So the first one is this reusable paper towels. The If You Care brand, you can find it. I believe Wegmans has it. I know for sure Whole Foods has it. And if you're in Upper Bucks County and you go to Ottsville, there's Kim Burton's Whole Foods. They definitely sell the If You Care brand. And they sell these reusable paper towels. It looks like a roll of paper towels that comes in a thin cardboard box. They're reusable. They're very absorbent. So if you have your little kids and you spill things in the kitchen, or you're a clumsy adult like me that spills things, they're great for mopping up liquids. And the great thing is you can reuse them. You can either wash them in your sink or toss them in the washing machine. And you can use them over and over again. I've gotten months out of some of them. And then when you're done with them, when they start falling apart, toss them in your compost bin. They're completely compostable. The other product that is very similar to that is referred to as a Swedish dishcloth. So on the right-hand side of my screen, you'll see the Dream Cloth. That just happens to be a particular brand name of a Swedish cloth. I get those from a company called Who Gives a Crap, who actually sells bamboo and recycled toilet paper. And those are a little bit thicker than the reusable paper towels. They're a little bit smaller, but they're perfect for washing your dishes, cleaning up around the kitchen. Again, they're very absorbent. They will last for months. And then when you're done with them, toss them in your compost bin. And then the third paper product that I'll mention before we talk about vegetables is, to me, it was my original unpaper product. And these are actually, they're unpaper napkins. And you put them on a paper towel roll, and you wash them over and over again, and they're just a soft cloth. They do mop up some liquid, but not nearly as well as, say, the Swedish dishcloth or the reusable paper towel. But again, I've had those um, for a few years now, and again, they just get tossed in the wash. I put them in with my other kitchen towels, and then I roll them up on the paper towel. You will not find an actual original paper towel in my kitchen. Um, you also won't find a box of tissues in my house because we just use toilet paper. It just cuts down on the waste. I don't need a cardboard box. Toilet paper works just, in my opinion, toilet paper works just as well as a tissue does. So those are a couple of, paper products to look at. From a foods perspective, dry goods. So a way to, keep waste low is to bulk cook or even bulk buy. So, not everybody can do that, and it may not make sense for everybody. If you're a single or if you're two people, buying a 20-pound bag of rice probably doesn't make sense, because at some point that rice is going to get stale, no matter how well you store it. But a 5-pound bag of rice is definitely cheaper than the smaller bags. And you can store it in a sealable container. I love canning jars, especially the big ones. You don't need anything fancy to seal the lid. And I keep those around the house for all sorts of things. And they will extend the shelf life of your food. So again, it's another way to keep costs low in your kitchen. When it comes to fruits and vegetables, so there are certain ways to store things so that they don't go bad as quickly. So refrigerating your leafy greens and cruciferous vegetables. So that would be your broccoli, your cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. All of those should get refrigerated. Just be mindful of how you're storing them in the refrigerator. You really should keep things as separated as possible. Things like mushrooms are very sensitive to smell, meaning they'll pick up all kinds of other scents, which might be fine for what you're cooking them with, but then again, it may not be. Don't refrigerate your tomatoes, because what's going to happen is the tomato is going to end up not ripening properly, and you're going to end up with a kind of a flat tasting tomato. Onions should stay away from apples and potatoes. And again, this goes into, the ethylene gas that different fruits and vegetables produce. So you want to know which ones are your producers and which ones are not, and kind of keep those away. Now, I will say the one exception is if you've got bananas and avocados that aren't ripe and you really want to eat one. Stick them next to those ethylene producers and help them ripen. You can even stick them in a paper bag. You can stick a banana or an avocado in a paper bag with, say, an apple or a couple of apples. And by the next day, it should be a little bit riper than it was. So it kind of, that ethylene gas traps itself in the paper bag, and it helps the ripening process along. But for the most part, if you want to really extend the shelf life for your fruits and vegetables, be mindful of that. And I do know that Carol had posted on our Facebook group a cute little narrative about the ethylene producers and which ones should and shouldn't be mixed together. So that's definitely a reference to take a look at if you haven't already seen it. All right, so here's some other items, things to keep in mind to keep things fresh. And these are just good reference points. So on the left, from the American Heart Association, and the Kroger grocery store, they put this little tips together for things that, how to store things in your pantry. So your garlic, your onions, your shallots, think cool, dark places. I was actually surprised by the watermelon. But then again, a watermelon really doesn't make it much past my countertop before it gets cut, and then I stick it in the fridge. That is something to keep in mind. Once you start cutting your fruits and vegetables, especially your fruits like an apple, your stone fruits, your peaches, and your nectarines, you're going to want to keep them in the fridge if you're not eating them right away. And that will help extend their shelf life. Leafy greens, again, keep those in the fridge. I find the best way to keep leafy greens fresh is to wrap them just gently in one of those unpaper towels and stick them in a reusable Ziploc bag. Don't close the bag, and then just stick them in. I stick them in my crisper, and they last much longer than if I were just to toss the head of lettuce, say, in my crisper. Broccoli and cauliflower. These I mentioned before as the cruciferous vegetables. I also refer to them as the stinky vegetables. They can produce a lot of gas. And so just be mindful when storing those next to other things. Just some basics of food storage will help with keeping things low waste. So first in, first out, right? That's just basic inventory control. Using your oldest things first to prevent waste and spoilage. Being mindful that the coldest spot is actually in the back of your fridge, but just be careful of sticking things in the back of your fridge, because if you got an older refrigerator, you can actually freeze things back there. Food storage containers. So plastic is great, but I know plastics has come under fire a lot recently because of microplastics. Glass is very easy to clean. I mentioned canning jars before. The other thing that is great is jars that you get from other foods. So if you buy a jar of applesauce from Shoal Orchards, it comes in a glass jar with a nice screw top lid on it. Wash it out, clean it up, and you've got a new jar to use for your grains, your beans, what have you, to store in your pantry. Make sure that you label your foods, put a date on them, so you're not doing the mystery package guessing, come the end of the week. The other thing to keep in mind is before you run to the grocery store or you get frustrated because you're going to order takeout because you can't find anything to eat, look in the fridge. Get a little creative. 9 times out of 10, there's probably something in there that can make a perfectly healthy meal, and it just takes a little creativity. Carol had actually shared with me a reel from Instagram, a gentleman who's actually creating an app. And it looked pretty cool, where he's, you can scan your food item. You can, put some details in about that food item. You can tag recipes that you've used in the past. So if it's a tomato, you've got a tomato-based recipe. You can tag those recipes in it. So it sounded like it's something he's just rolling out in its initial phases. But again, he pointed out the fact that, it's easy to say I have nothing in the fridge, but when you look, there's really plenty of things. There's probably plenty of things in there if you just knew how to put them together to make a meal. All right, so kitchen scraps. Before you toss it in the trash or in the compost bin, here are some things to think about. I know many of us are coffee drinkers. I have, a giant mug of black coffee every morning. Those coffee grounds, mine end up going in the compost bin. Occasionally during the summer months or spring and summer months, I will toss them into my planters outside. But for the most part, they end up in my compost bin. You can actually make a face and body exfoliator with those spent coffee grounds. And I gave you a little recipe down at the bottom there. So it's just 3 tablespoons of coffee grounds, some sugar, a natural oil, and you've basically got an exfoliator for your skin. And who doesn't love smelling like a freshly ground cup of coffee, right? So there are some extreme ways, and to me, that's probably a little bit on the extreme side for many of us. I've even seen some folks that will use banana peels to make vegan bacon. For me, that probably takes it a little bit too far, and my banana peels always end up in my compost bin. Um, but other things that are a little bit easier for us to handle would be things like your cauliflower and your broccoli stems, right? You can peel those, trim them, trim off the woody parts, and shred them to make a slaw. You can even use the larger pieces like dipping sticks, like a carrot stick. Typically, if I'm cutting fresh broccoli or cauliflower, I end up snacking on the stems while I'm cooking, or my pups are getting a snack while I'm cooking, and they're chomping on the cauliflower and the broccoli stems. Um, and if you think about, the slaw that I mentioned, right? If you've got a food processor, it probably has a blade on it that does shredding. So you can toss all of those in there, and that little bag of broccoli slaw that you buy at the grocery store, you've just made your own. And you've saved things from going into the waste bin. Um, Another easy one is a peanut butter jar. If you eat overnight oats, you know, it's always hard to get the last of the peanut butter out of the jar. Mix your overnight oats in there. That's a super easy one to do. The other one that I like to do is make a Thai peanut sauce. So instead of scraping the jar, leave up to a third of a cup of peanut butter in the jar. Add some soy sauce, some rice vinegar, lime, a little bit of sweetener, some ginger, sriracha, and then shake it up. And you've got a great little Thai peanut sauce. Um, Potato skins. I will tell you, I rarely peel a potato. Even if I'm making mashed potatoes, the skins are going in it because they are so very nutritious. But potato skins aren't for everybody in their mashed potatoes. And there are times when you do want to peel the potato, but there's no reason to toss those skins in the compost bin. You can actually store them in your fridge, submerged in water, for about 3 to 4 days. If you think it's going to go beyond the 4 days, I would actually just change the water out um, and pat them dry, spritz them with a little bit of olive oil, salt, and pepper, and toss them in your air fryer or roast in the oven on about 425, and you've got some great little potato skins to snack on. And you can do any of your potatoes. So I would mix together your russets, your Lehigh Valley Golds, and your sweet potatoes, and you've got a mix of potato skins to snack on. Um, Similar with stale bread. You can do a French toast casserole, you can make bread pudding, or you can grind them down to make breadcrumbs. So all of these things are things that you can, to me, are super simple, easy things that we can do right in our own kitchen to save on the waste. And most of the stuff won't even make it to the compost bin. All right. So one of my favorite ways to save waste in the kitchen is with stock. Um, so if you've ever looked at a label of vegetable stock or beef stock, chicken stock, right? They're pretty high in sodium. Some of them may have extra things in them that you don't necessarily want. But what I do is I keep a bag in my freezer of all kinds of scraps, mostly onions, celery, garlic, and carrot. But then I'll add in things like mushroom stems. So when the stem of the mushroom is maybe a little soft or it's a little on the woody side, I toss those in there. All parts of the herbs can go in, even the wilty ones. If you've got some tomatoes that are a little banged up, and not really, great for a salad. You can toss those in. Um, Potato skins, again, eat them first, but if you've got too many of them, toss them in your stock. You can do, again, all varieties of potato skins. Um, I don't typically stick my cruciferous vegetables in there because they're the stinky vegetables that produce that ethylene gas. But in small quantities, you can stick those in as well. The things you really want to avoid are items that are moldy or really mushy. Those just send to your compost bin. But typically, You can see in that picture there, I've got a couple of Ziploc bags. I don't really keep Ziploc bags in my kitchen. Those are from greens that I get from one of the farms that I visit. So when they do loose greens like spinach, I save those bags, and I store my scraps in them. Um, and you can see I've got what looks like celery and onion skins. The interesting thing is every batch comes out a little bit different. Color wise, you can see the canning jar that I have there. That was a batch that I had made just this week. It came out a little bit darker. There was probably some extra onion skins in there. You can actually toss pieces of beets in there or your beet greens, and that'll add a red hue to it. Sometimes I need a stock that's a little bit more on the mushroomy side if I'm making an Asian soup. So I'll kind of root through my bag of scraps and look for all of my mushrooms and toss those in. But basically what you're going to end up doing is once you've got a full bag of scraps, so about a gallon size, you're going to add them to a large pot. You're going to cover them with water, and you're going to bring it to a boil, and you're going to simmer for 45 to 60 minutes. And then you're going to have some very wilted vegetables that you're going to just strain out. And then you can store that stock in your fridge for up to a week, or in your freezer for a month. And then, I was mentioning the mushroom stock. So again, I'll go heavy on the mushroom bits, add a chunk of ginger, which I usually keep in the freezer. And then after about 30 minutes of cooking, I add a half a cup of Bragg's liquid aminos or a soy sauce or a tamari, half a cup of mirin. And then maybe in the last 15 minutes, I'll add a couple of pieces of dried seaweed. And then you can just add into it, once you've got that stock created, you can add in some ramen noodles, some Asian vegetables, some broccoli, some cauliflower, and you basically have, a bowl of Asian soup. Better than takeout. Okay, so that was kind of everything that I had to share. I will, as I've done with my last two webinars, I always have a few challenges. So the thing is, you don't need to make big, gigantic changes. Start small. Maybe you like the idea of using the coffee grounds as a fertilizer, or the stock, the scrap stocks. Those are small little changes that will make a difference in your own kitchen. This is also a good time to remind you to support your local farmers. Eat seasonally. Ask your farmers about their seconds or their grade B produce. And this is where I'll mention a couple of local farmers. So there's two in particular where I regularly get my fruits and vegetables from. I have a CSA with Cabbage Throw Farms, which is an organic farm in Asbury, New Jersey. And they actually come to the Easton Farmers Market. And during tomato season, Farmer Dean will actually have grade B tomatoes. And these are ones that are just super ripe. They're ready to be cooked like right then and there. And I'll buy a giant box from him at about half the price. And so I'm getting heirloom tomatoes really cheap. The only thing that you need to do is be prepared to be able to cook them. Or prep them for freezing. And typically what I'll do is I'll just chop them up and put them in containers without even cooking them. And I toss them in my freezer, and then I can make sauce during during winter. The other farmer that I go to is Shoal Orchards. So that's right on Center Street in Bethlehem. So I'm assuming, if you're local to Bethlehem, many of you know Shoal Orchards. When you walk into their little vegetable hut, on the left-hand side is a counter where they typically have bushels of seconds. A lot of times it's apples. During peach season, they've got peaches and nectarines. Again, they're the imperfects. So they might have a blemish on them. They might have a bruise on them. But I mean, this past week, I got a half a bushel of potatoes for $3.50 that is going to end up making a few batches of potato soup that I'll be able to freeze. So seconds and grade B produce, if your farmer doesn't have them out, I bet you if you ask, it's something that they'd be willing to sell to you. And again, that keeps them from having to send things to the compost bin. So my other challenge is to look at making low waste or no waste meals. Again, look before you go to the grocery store, look in your fridge. Eat the peels. There's no need to peel your carrots and potatoes for most meals. And then shred or rice your broccoli and your cauliflower stems, and then use all the parts of the herbs. So sometimes, I personally love a good basil pesto, but if you've got a little bit of parsley that really won't amount to much in any recipe, or you have, some other herbs, you can toss them all in and make just an herb pesto. And then they're also great in your stocks. So those are a few challenges that I would ask you to, try. But again, keep it small. You don't have to, like I said, you don't have to do anything big and sweeping to make an impact. All right. So, some of the resources, from the Just the Facts slide, a lot of the numbers came from the USDA and the FDA, as well as a waste management company called Recycle Track Systems. They had a huge amount of information on their website. One of my favorite Instagram chefs, his name is Max Lamana. He actually has a cookbook called More Plants, Less Waste. And he has, again, it's a cookbook entirely dedicated to using scraps and things that you would ordinarily just toss in his recipes. In addition to Max Lamana, there's a gentleman. He's actually quite funny. His handle is the Spicy Mustache. And then there is Plant U, who has a scrappy cooking series. And she actually has a whole cookbook as well on scrappy cooking. And then I left my my Facebook and Instagram, which you can find me at Vegan Smitty. So that is, I'm going to stop sharing.
And I have a question in the chat.
Okay.
Steve said, I put my orange peels in my compost, but I've heard that you shouldn't. What's the story?
Oh, I stick my orange peels in there. I'm not sure why you wouldn't. Generally in compost, I know when Easton Public Market had their composting program, they took fruits, vegetables, eggshells, coffee grinds, and even meat was allowed. I believe it was cooked meat. My compost bin, I only do fruits and vegetables. But yeah, I will stick my orange peels in there for sure. Okay, so somebody said some folks have told me they're too acidic. That may be true, and I guess if you're producing a lot of orange peels or even citrus fruits, that could be a problem. I do know, and I didn't mention it here in the slides, but if you're a sourdough baker and you have a particularly like uh, your recipes produce a lot of discard, you can toss that in your compost bin. But if it's still got some activity to it, you just might be mindful of how much you put in there. So, it's kind of one of those old adages, too much of a good thing is a bad thing. One orange a day, I don't think is going to make a difference. If you stick, if you peel an 8-pound bag of oranges, that might be another story. Because the thing is, depending on how, and I know there's another series coming up on composting, but depending on how your compost bin is set up, right, you're inviting things like worms and whatnot into the compost bin to help the breakdown process. So something that is high on the acid side, or like the sourdough, the citrus peels, may detract from those critters coming in and helping you decompose. All
Um,
right.
Thank you. And we could take some more questions. And I think because of the size of the group, Emily, if you can unmute folks and use the raise your hand feature, if you have any, or your own tips to share, or if you have questions. While we do that, this was great info, and I'm kind of patting myself on the back because I do some of those, but I, of course, learned some new ones. I do want to circle back when you were talking about bulk, because bulk can mean a lot or a little.
Yes.
So, what you were speaking of is buying the 25-pound bag of whole wheat flour or whatever. Um, and you also mentioned like specifically about rice. I actually freeze rice and it's terrific. And I freeze flour. And in fact,
Yes.
I'll take flour and just use it right out of the freezer. I don't have to thaw it or anything.
Right.
So I'll throw that in. But I also want to speak to the bulk where you buy just as much or as little as you want. And that's a feature that we're going to have at our co-op market. So we'll have a lot of different kinds of foods, grains, rice, nuts, different things, and herbs and spices. So you can go, and we're hoping we can get all the paperwork so that we can bring our own containers. If we can't, we will have reusable containers that you can purchase and then just keep bringing them back, and also probably like paper bags or something. But for example, do I like what's it called? Nutritional yeast or whatever it's called.
Nutritional yeast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
guess what? Yeah, I don't. But luckily, I only bought like 2 tablespoons. And then I knew I didn't like it, and I didn't buy a whole jar and then either have to, share it with somebody or get rid of it. So that bulk section is going to be a really good way to buy as much or as little as you want. You're also not paying for any packaging, and you're not paying for any advertising. So it makes it really cost effective. So that was my commercial for,
Yep.
for buying bulk.
Carol, I don't know if the food co-op will be doing this with herbs and spices too, but I know like Kim Burton's Whole Foods, you
Mm-hmm.
always have that one recipe that needs like a teaspoon of a particular herb, and it's not one that you generally use. And you're like, well, I don't want this big jar sitting, suddenly a
Mm-hmm.
teaspoon, and you get the jar, it looks like a lot, right? Those small jars of
Right.
spices. But that's where, again, a different variety of bulk, a different definition of bulk comes into
To
play, where
buy
you
what
can
you
go
need.
in
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
just buy that one teaspoon that you need.
Mm-hmm. And conversely, I actually looked at my spices, and I don't cook much, and a lot of them had expired. So I washed out all the jars, and I had a lot of those little half glass ones, and
Mm-hmm.
went to Kimberton and bought just a little half jar full of all the different things. I bought 6 half jars and 1 full jar of oregano, and all of it cost $7.50. Now,
Yep.
you probably couldn't have filled 2 of those little jars for that much.
Right.
So it's even if you're buying a lot, it's really economical. So
Yes.
yes, we are definitely planning to have that in the new store. So are there any hands going up or people putting questions in the chat or anyone else? Let's see.
I don't have anything right now.
Yeah.
Let's see.
So, okay, well, I'll do our PSA. So first off, thanks to the library. Thank you very much, Liza, for sharing your firsthand knowledge. And also, just want to say about the co-op, if you're not familiar with it, we're bringing a co-op grocery store to 250 East Broad Street in Bethlehem. And it will be a full service grocery store, so it'll have all the things. Most folks will be able to get everything that they would get on a regular shop, conventional, organic produce, meat, dairy, pasta sauce, toilet paper, baby food, and we'll have a prepared foods department. So an on-site kitchen where we'll be making soups and sandwiches and entrees and smoothies and all the things. And the co-op is owned by member owners. You heard us talk about being member owners, but it will be open to everyone to shop at. So that's what makes it community owned. The big question is, when will we be opening? We're working very hard to do the last steps so that we can open this year. That includes raising funds. So if you're so inclined to help us get the store open that way, that's terrific. If you can support us in other ways, even just coming to these programs and telling folks, that we have these programs, and if you found it valuable, that will be great. We do put all our webinars on our website. So all I have to do is put webinar in the search bar, and all of them will pop up from the last few years. And we think it's a pretty good, a valuable library of some good information. So speaking of, the next one will be Tuesday, March 10th, and Steve Fluharty is another co-op member owner and a master gardener, and he's going to be talking about starting seeds indoors. Last month, another one of our member owners, Jen Top, did one on basically sowing seeds in the winter and how to make little mini greenhouses out of gallon jugs. So you can find that on our website if that interests you. And then in April, we will be having a session on April 13th on urban composting. So Liza mentioned that as another way to address the waste that we're generating. I'd also like to invite all of you. This is an event we're having. It's a social gathering that we'll be having at McCarthy's Red Stag Pub. It'll be on Wednesday, February 25th, so in just a couple more weeks. We'll be there from 6 to 9. It's basically come hang out with some other like-minded folks. You don't have to be a member owner. Bring your friends. If you're not a member owner and you want to learn more about what we're up to, that would be a good time to talk to us and find out. And we'll offer some incentives for becoming a member owner that night. Also, the Red Stag Pub is offering that for any food or non-alcoholic beverages that we purchase, that they'll contribute 10% back to the co-op. So it's not a fundraiser per se, but they are generously donating that to us. So mark your calendars and plan to come out and hang with us on that evening. So that's the end of my PSAs. Did anyone think of any other comments or things you want to share that you're doing at your house, or questions for Liza? I guess you answered everybody's questions tonight and gave us some good things to try. Okay, well then I hope we'll see you. You will need to register on the library website. Emily, is that one up yet for the March one?
Yes, that one should be up.
Okay, very good. So you can go there to register and tell your friends, and we hope to see you. If we don't see you on the 25th at the Red Stag, that we'll see you um, here on Zoom on March 10th. Okay, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, thanks
Good
again.
job. Good job. Thanks.
All right, I'm just gonna end the presentation.
Okay, thanks again, both of
Yeah,
you.
thank you.
Mm-hmm.